In this episode of the All Access Automation podcast, Lucas and I discuss the important elements needed when looking to scale automation, how to ensure that this aligns with your strategic direction, and also what the future of automation holds and the importance of embracing innovation. I hope you all enjoy. Hello everyone and welcome to another episode of the All Access Automation podcast with Roboo. And today I am delighted to be joined by Lucas, who's an expert associate partner at McKinsey. Lucas, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you so much for having me.
You just come over from Hamburg, is it?
Yeah, that is correct. Yeah. That's where I live currently.
Yeah,
and I never mind a trip to London.
Yeah, it's not the worst spot to be. So we're here in a lovely sunny morning here in London, actually. So really looking forward to this one. We'll be discussing a bit about your background, I suppose, your passion for automation and process improvement and process excellence and how that kind of came about. But it's also been recently announced that you're going to be a guest speaker and a keynote speaker at our All Eyes on Automation in
Indeed.
Berlin. You looking forward to it?
Absolutely. Just reposted this morning on LinkedIn to kind of make it announced for everyone. No, super much looking forward to that. Going to be an exciting opportunity to meet other enthusiasts to talk about the topics we love, right? So very excited. Thank you for inviting me to that one as well.
No, of course. Looking forward to hearing more about it. And it's going to be a great event. So I suppose it's not your local city, but you can travel up to Berlin or travel down to Berlin, I suppose, for the event.
Yeah, it's fairly easy, but kind of public transportation right now, just when I need it. There's the rebuilding of the tracks in between Hamburg and Berlin. Okay. Maybe it's done by the time, but let's see about that.
Hopefully in time for November anyway. That's great. But let's get straight into it, I suppose. So just tell me a bit about your background, and I suppose, and where that kind of passion for process improvement came from.
Sure. Actually, I need to back up a little bit, right?
Yeah.
So basically, with my age group, we're this beautiful age group that kind of grew up where everything was still on paper, right? So we learned how to read a road atlas, right? And how to kind of navigate your way when you're lost. And then kind of while we were growing up, technology was growing up. And all of a sudden, there was Google Maps or similar things, right? And you're like, oh, wow, this is so cool, right? Technology can do so much for me. And that kind of was the story of my life, right? I learned something to do it myself, and all of a sudden there was technology to help me with that. And that passion kind of evolved over life, right? As a little kid, I was fantasizing about cool stuff that can happen, like you sit down on the couch and it automatically turns on the TV because that's what you usually do when you sit down on the couch, right? At least at the time I was thinking that's what you do on a couch.
Yeah.
And I was like, hey, that's technology that can do something for me. And so I was always excited by, things that just work and machines that can take off the mundane tasks in my day. So I really enjoyed that. So I was fascinated by automation machines and went into mechanical engineering at university.
Okay,
Right? And I didn't really, I didn't design gearboxes or anything, but I was going into production technologies, systems engineering, these type of things to really think, how do they click? How do they work together? How can I automate really a stream of production? And that's kind of my journey, right? Everything that I did was about what can technology do to kind of enhance my life, to make it easier. And that's kind of a running theme throughout. And now working as a consultant at McKinsey, right, I was exposed through our operational excellence program kind of at the start of my career to operational excellence in services, right? And this is where I got stuck, right? I became passionate about the topic.
Yeah.
And the reason is basically it was the entire same thing over again, right? I started with kind of the basics and the fundamentals of operational excellence, lean management in office environments, right? Simple process design, managing your capacity well. And all of a sudden, right, while I was consulting, there was these new trends coming up, right? The early days of, single technology, RPA stuff. Everybody was super excited and now we'll knock it out of the park. But right, it just keeps evolving and so much more things are possible now. So kind of that story of my life that I've always been excited by, it just continues right now with what I do in the field of automation. So really found my passion in that.
Brilliant, yeah. That's really interesting, I suppose. What's it like kind of going from the engineering side of things to then the consulting world? How did you find that transition?
to be perfectly honest,
Yeah.
I never worked as an engineer, right?
Right, okay,
So
okay,
I studied in the field, and
Yeah.
I think I learned a lot about how to approach problems in a structured way,
Okay,
how
yeah.
to really figure out finding solutions for a problem at hand. But then really, I stepped into consulting at the start of my career. Of course, there was a lot of learning for me involved in that, but it put me on that path of continuous learning along the maturity curve, right? And it's just growing ever since. So I really enjoy that. And I think actually the engineering thinking and mindset has helped a lot, right? Analyzing problems, understanding where it's coming from, to then really thinking about solutions and developing solutions, right?
Exactly. Yeah,
and
yeah.
while developing, you know the game, right? There's
Yeah.
problems coming up while you're solving one problem, a new one comes up. So it's still an exciting kind of engineering journey.
Of course, yeah, and it's a similar skill set, I suppose, like you said, breaking down a problem and in a structured way, and then trying to find a solution for it. But yeah, I suppose people are probably wondering how Roboo and McKinsey have kind of come together in this. How did that collaboration come about?
I think it came about that there's a very complementary kind of skill set that is required. Actually, funnily enough, right? On the All Eyes on Automation in Berlin in November,
Yeah.
I'll actually talk a little bit about, not just the automation part of things and the tech and the code, but really the other work that we as McKinsey do, which is more surrounding all of this. What are the other elements you want to have in place to really make your automation program soar and make it grow and scale and not just get stuck in individual pilots or proof of concept somewhere. So there's an element in that there's more to automation than tech and code. And I think we as McKinsey are really well positioned to play in a lot of these fields given our experience, right? We're close to CXOs, so to kind of the executives, to the management level, right? We're very close to them. We have experience in managing large-scale programs. So how do I work with finance functions, P&L, bottom line impact, making sure you actually see the benefits, right? I think that's a strong suit from McKinsey. Now, I myself, right, I'd probably never be really good at developing code. I tried that once in university, developing code for kind of a chess robot. Didn't turn out well.
Oh, no,
right?
tell me about that.
No, let's not go there. That was not my best piece of work, to be honest. But right, it basically shows that's not my strong suit.
Yeah,
But I
okay.
think the collaboration between Roboo and McKinsey is one of these things where it's really synergy and common benefit, right? I mean, you guys are great at the services you provide, the solutions you know about, the integration you can do on that side. And I think that just matches perfectly with what we as McKinsey typically do. So I'm very happy we got this collaboration going and looking to grow it further as well.
Yeah, absolutely. No, I think it makes sense. Like sometimes you might start off with one maybe automation project and one bot, and that's fine, and you don't really need any structure around it. But then when an account starts to grow and when you start to find new opportunities and the client wants to have new opportunities in different areas, you need that bit of structure around it, I think. And especially from your perspective, being able to speak at that level, that's what they want to know about. They don't really care too much about the in-depth technology anyway. So it's very important to have that as well.
Absolutely, right? And sometimes there's these fun Instagram quotes, right? Where one of them goes, without commitment, you'll never start, but without consistency, you'll never finish.
Yeah.
Right? And I think it's very true for automation projects as well, right? Yeah. You need first wins, right? You don't want to go in and first build 9 months of structure to be ready to automate the first thing. No, you want to do something, you want to try something, you want to say, hey, this works.
Exactly.
This is cool, right?
Yeah.
And then people get excited and you see changes possible, right? And then kind of you start hitting the wall and the problems. And right when you try to grow big and to scale, that is when kind of the trouble starts, oftentimes, at least in my experience with a lot of projects.
Yeah.
So I think it's an interesting dynamic that's at play where you want to start quickly. However, kind of there will be troubles along the way.
Definitely. And I think it's the same with anything that you do. I mean, if you take a sport, for example, more than likely when you start off, you're going to get much better really quickly. And then there comes a point where it's just marginal gains the whole time. Like,
you just plateau at one level, right?
Yeah. And you really have to try and find those areas where you can improve on to actually make that progress. So, very similar with projects as well. I think it's something that we find with our clients as well is around the kind of, not obsession, but the want to have more automation and more technology, and constantly kind of looking to implement it and use that to improve processes. But I think, and something that you touched on earlier around the operational efficiency and the importance of that, is the processes have to be right first in order to wrap technology around it. How have you kind of found that experience with clients?
Yeah, there's a couple of reflections that go on in my head, right? The first one, as you say, right, a lot of people are looking to doing cool stuff with automation, lowering their costs, right? Some of the interesting stuff we found lately, right? 50% of executives, they failed their cost targets in the last year.
Right, okay.
Right? So they're under massive pressure to reduce cost, but they just don't know how, right? And a lot of them right now, with all the buzz that's going on, right, Gen AI stuff, they're increasingly turning towards digitization, automation to make their cost savings happen.
Yeah.
So there's definitely a will and a need to do all of this, right? But then to your point, the other thing that we found in our studies is I think only 3 to 5% of organizations are really successful at scale when it comes to automation, right? A lot of them stumble along the way.
Yeah.
And I think it comes down to basically what you were alluding to, which is, do I have the fundamentals in place, right? Do I start at the right place? And sorry, I'm going a bit on a rant here.
No, but, it's what we want. Not a rant, but it's just exploratory.
All right, cool. So let me paint you a little picture of how I typically think about automation and being ready for automation, right? So I've used this actually internally for a long time with us at McKinsey.
Are you
allowed
to share this, or is it?
Yeah. It's kind of my picture. It comes out in my head, so it's kind of the visual that I used. But it resonated really quickly with people.
Okay.
So I'd like you to think of kind of the old ancient Greek temples, right?
Okay. Yeah.
Which typically they have a solid base. Then there's a couple pillars that go up, and then there's a roof on top, right? I typically think about automation and automation readiness in a similar way, right? To me, there needs to be a solid foundation, which is what you were just alluding to, the basics of kind of operational excellence. You want to have good process standards, good process design, taking out any waste, any unnecessary steps that you don't want to have. You want to align your organization to your processes, to limit the number of handovers, to just, create flow. And you really want to manage your capacity properly. You want to understand what's driving my workload, what's driving the activity in my organization, and try to optimize, go first for the big ticket items, right? That's the biggest bang for the buck.
Yeah.
And those three things to me are fundamentals that have almost nothing to do with technology, right? It's really the fundamentals of what you want to have in place. So in my Greek temple example, right, that's kind of the foundation at the very bottom.
Yeah.
Then I think there's kind of the pillars that hold up the roof, right? And to me, there's a lot of stuff there when it comes to, enabling capabilities, I would call it. So what do I mean by that? It's the simple availability of the right tools, right? And sufficient tools, right? It's probably not just going to be just RPA in itself,
100%,
right? It's going to be a combination of multiple things that you want to combine. How do I digitize my inputs? How do I access them? How do I connect my systems? Right? Those type of questions, kind of one pillar to me. Another one is your existing IT infrastructure, right? And can you access it even, or are you still, stuck on a mainframe from the 80s and you don't know how to interact with it?
You have a guy that's been there for 40 years. And
exactly, right? And we fight those day in, day out, right? They're still out there, and they're the backbone of the economy in some places, similar to Excel.
100%.
And I think then a lot of it right now is around data and data strategy. And do we have clean data? Do we have enough data, right? Do we have data that we can use for training? Another pillar that is kind of required as part of the Greek temple. And I think one last one I really want to emphasize is the capability side, both on people deploying technology, but also people that work at the front line, that understand technology and how it changes their life and how they can use it to their advantage. So really capability building at scale. And this is another interesting one. I think 70% of executives basically go, I don't find or have the capabilities in place that I need for the ambitions that I have when it comes to automation.
Yeah.
And right? That's just
I'm not
one.
surprised by that stat.
No,
either,
absolutely not.
Yeah,
But right, that's basically one pillar out the window, right?
Yeah, yeah.
So, but kind of completing the temple and building it, right?
Mm-hmm.
The real benefit and using automation successfully at scale, that's basically the roof you build on top,
Yeah.
right? That's the roof you kind of set on top once all the pillars are in place and the foundations are in place. Now, you probably know where I'm going with this, which is in many organizations, we just find the foundation's completely cracked,
Yeah.
right? It's just not there, right? Sometimes I'm happy when I find a process design, but then you pull it out and it like has a layer of dust on top of it, right? So it's kind of like reality and what's on paper, it's like super far away from each other.
Yeah.
And your starting point is just really challenging to drive automation successfully at scale.
Yeah, I think you've hit the nail on the head really with that analogy. I think there's just so many examples of clients that you see that they might have 2 or 3 of those, but it's the fourth one that kind of lets it down. And you do try to wrap technology around it, and it's like, well, we'll figure it out when we get there. But in the end, as it begins to scale and as it grows and as that roof gets heavier, then it needs the solid foundations that it needs to actually keep it up with, which sometimes aren't there. So how do you kind of work with the client to get those foundations and get those pillars in place to provide a good stable foundation for automation to actually be implemented?
It's a fun question because the answer is one that I think clients often don't want to hear, right?
Mm-hmm.
The blunt answer would be, guys, do your homework, right? Climbing the automation ladder is really hard work, right?
Mm-hmm.
And the first steps of building those foundations, that's tough, right? Now, the problem with that is you probably don't want to put in the hard work if it's not recognized and if there's no, push or energy behind.
Yeah.
So, right, instead of, delivering only tough messages, we actually try to change the odds of the game a little bit.
Okay.
Right? So you want to position automation as one of the key levers to reach your goals, right? To help the executives reach their cost-saving targets that they have or have been given. And we kind of want to steer it from the top to say, hey, if you want to do this right, this is what you want to do. This is what you need to have in place, right? So maybe we run something like a readiness assessment at the very beginning to basically say which of the elements of the Greek temple, right, do you actually have and which ones are the ones you want to fix while you get going, right? Very important. I'm not saying first fix all the basics and then we can start thinking about automation. No, there's going to be
take. It has to,
Exactly, right?
Yeah.
What we said in the beginning, you want to excite, you want to see first change early. So it's not meant to delay, but it's meant to fix in parallel so that it can be successful in the long run. And I think really it starts with exciting your executives about what needs to be done, with them understanding that, right, automation is not a holy grail, but that it's really a ladder to climb, right? And that it's tough work and that you do need to put the work in. But I think when they're on board, right, and they're investing and kind of setting up the right infrastructure and the right people to really work hand in hand, not just the automation team, but really together with the business, with finance, with HR, all of those coming together, I think then you create momentum, right, and excitement, and then you have a chance to actually start working on the basics while driving towards your automation.
Yeah. And how is that normally received? Is it the way you tend to position that message where it's like, look, this needs to be in place, but that's to actually help your KPIs at the end of the year? Is that how you kind of create that atmosphere with them? Because as you said, sometimes that message can be a bit stark and you're trying to say, well, no, but we've invested in this automation, that'll fix all the problems. So how do you kind of go about that conversation?
Yeah, it's also a good one, right? Because there's a lot of people that want to leapfrog, right?
Yeah.
And that just, there's something that can do this for me, right? That type of mindset.
Surely. Yeah.
Right? And especially with kind of the promises and the amazing things that you can do right now with Gen AI, right? My mind is blown oftentimes what's actually possible.
Yeah.
But then you kind of go back and say, okay, I want to train my internal model. I want to train it on, I don't know, data that I have from the past. Let's talk customer service, right?
Yeah.
And you have your tickets in customer service that you've been documenting for the last 10 years. You take those and you feed them into your large language model or whatever solution you have to kind of automate the process. Well, guess what? If those tickets are not high quality, the answer of your model are not going to be high quality.
Yeah.
And then, right, you kind of come back and say, okay, what defines quality in the tickets, how we document them? And then you go back to, hey, you know what? It's probably going to be having standards on how we document them, right? It comes back to the basics, the fundamentals that we just talked about 5 minutes ago.
Yeah.
So it's kind of the circle where you always end up back at you need to put in the work, right?
Yeah.
Sorry to say. So there is the element where we try to, or where sometimes there's an ambition to leapfrog. But I think it's kind of this learning journey that people also go on, where sometimes you do need to hit a wall, right? And sometimes you do need to cross the bridge when you get there.
Yeah.
Because some problems resolve themselves over time. So it's a delicate balance. But me personally, right, I'm a big believer in doing things right the first time, right? Do it properly, and then you basically have that success long term.
Yeah, in an ideal world, that's
in an ideal world, of course, right? We all know kind of things happen over time, so it's sometimes this, sometimes that.
Yeah. Okay, fair enough. And although automation is kind of possible in pretty much every industry, what are some of the ones that you might have had the most experience with in terms of industries and sectors that you felt it was really successful?
Yeah, I mean, kind of automation as a term, right? It's super broad.
Exactly.
And I think its various forms apply everywhere, right? Whether this is production, this could be even in mining, you could talk about automation, right? What I think I want to focus in is what you and I have more touch points with, I would assume, which is more kind of the office environment, something done behind a computer screen, maybe something done in customer service over a phone, right? But more the service-orientated things. So I think my personal exposure has mostly been in either service-type industries, something like banking, insurance, or in something that is common across industries, your corporate business functions, finance, HR, procurement. I think that field is super exciting. Why do I say so? It just applies everywhere, right? Every organization out there, right? Even the smallest startup kind of somehow needs to figure out, how do we do finance in here, right? And how do we keep our books up to date?
Exactly.
So it's just evident everywhere, and I think there's heaps of opportunities. And because it's kind of everywhere, use cases are applicable almost everywhere. So you have a lot of scale and kind of things you can work on. So it's an exciting field to be in right now.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And we're seeing more and more that, you might start in a finance kind of part of the company, and then the finance people start to talk about, there's some great automation that we have here, and then the HR kind of get interested as well. And you create that environment of not entrepreneurship, but in terms of the innovation side of things, where they start reaching out maybe to their CTO and going, how can we get some of this automation as well? So that's the kind of culture that you want to spread throughout the company as well, because as you said, there's kind of endless opportunities when it comes to that.
Yeah. I think you want to, a partner once told me, look, you got to do good things, but also talk about it, right? So there's basically, when you have success with your automation cases, celebrate them, right?
Yeah.
It's not a given, right? And I think a lot of people, we just don't get exposed to it, right? You and I, of course, we're enthusiasts, right? We're doing podcasts on this, right? So we're obviously following everything that's going on, but a lot of people aren't. And I think it's also our job to role model to an extent, and to keep everybody informed. What's the state of the art? What's possible right now? And I think that's also a lot of what we do, right? You kind of show up to ideation sessions and you just say, hey, this is what we've seen at others. This is what we've jointly developed. And right, oftentimes everything's evolving so fast, I can't keep up, right? So also I need to ask my colleagues and say, hey, what did you guys do? And what's kind of the latest and greatest? Yeah. So we need to make sure that excitement gets out there, and more people throughout the organizations we work with actually recognize the power of automation and what it can do. Yeah,
no, absolutely. And I think sometimes when you do sort of share the latest and greatest things, that's when the client gets excited, but you're like, oh, but you're not there yet. So there's that kind of conversation that needs to be had as well, which I think is important, because they will realize in the long run that wasn't the right thing to do, to kind of jump into a technology when the foundations weren't there. So Yeah, I think it's such an interesting topic. I mean, it's just it's so new as well that you're right that it is constantly evolving. You can't just pull up a PowerPoint that you had 10 years ago and dust it off, like you said, and there it is. It's the same as it was now. It's totally different. So it is about kind of managing that conversation, I think, with the client.
Correct. And you just sparked kind of one client situation I want to reference real quick, right?
Yeah.
No details and everything, but just kind of what was happening. And I think it will resonate to a lot of people.
Yeah.
So basically, this was a case where somebody was super excited about what technology can do. And it was on not really dispute management on the invoice processing process and accounts payables, but it was more like, vendor queries, somebody asking a question, hey, I don't quite get this. Why does this not match? What's on the purchase order? Right? It's the typical conversation of things that have always been there.
Yeah.
And basically now we found, you could automate that, right? Some of that conversation a chatbot can handle, or, some other technology solution where you don't have the feeling of I need to type it into a chat, but it really feels like a natural conversation. That is possible. And that's exciting.
Yeah.
Now, the conversation that I was having at the time was, well, but shouldn't we make sure that we don't have issues in the first place?
Yeah,
right?
yeah,
Isn't that where we should put our energy?
Yeah.
That actually what's on the invoice and the purchase order, that it matches in the first place so we don't have the need for the conversation instead of trying to automate it, right? And this is kind of we sometimes fall in love with technology and we go after everything that technology can do. And I think that is one of the things that I see with many clients. We've done this because we were able to, right? But but you shouldn't have done it because it's not the right thing to do.
Yeah.
And I think this is also, once again, right, where I think we as McKinsey tried to take a step back. And because we're not super close to the code all the time, at least not people like myself. We do have people that are, but me personally, right? I would take that step back and say, but that's not something we want to automate, right? Kind of one thing maybe to take away that I use a lot when speaking with clients is what I would call the ESSA Framework, right?
Okay.
Consultants talking in frameworks, surprise.
You can skip for a few minutes now.
It's actually it's one that really also works very well when you're kind of thinking through prioritization, right?
Okay,
and ESSA basically stands for ESSA, eliminate, standardize, simplify, automate, right? And what that does
it's
for
last.
you,
it's last.
automate is last,
Yeah,
right? It's not technology first, right? You really want to understand what are we trying to achieve here? What's the business problem? What's the assignment, right? And then how can I eliminate everything that's not helping in that, right? Instead of being super complicated on some authentication or whatsoever, why do I need it, right? And kind of do that challenging step first. Then try to standardize to increase scale, to have more of the same, so you increase your effectiveness. Then try, is there not a simpler way to do this compared to what we do today, right? Cool example on my laptop, right? I used to have to type in my password all the time. Now I just do the fingerprints thing, right? And we do this for kind of two-factor authentication and everything, right? That you use it for a login, right? That's a long time, but kind of integrating it into your process is a simpler way than typing passwords.
Yeah.
Amazing, right? So all of these steps we kind of run through. Eliminate, standardize, simplify, and whatever remains, then we ask, okay, how do we automate this?
Yeah.
Right? And the cool part about the entire thing is you're even going to be more successful in automating that because
100%.
It's simpler to automate, right?
Yeah.
So it's kind of a win-win situation for everybody.
Yeah. And like you just hit the nail on the head. I mean, if you go through like a process where there's loads of exceptions, it's like, well, we're going to have to factor all these into the RPA, but it's like, at this stage, is it worth it? Like,
Correct.
So, yeah.
Correct. And I think that's kind of the other element in terms of mindset change that I try to introduce when talking about automation, right? A lot of times automation feels daunting, right? You look at your process and you're like, oh, there's so much stuff. There's so many exceptions. There's so many rules. And there's all this. It's going to take a lot of time to automate that, right? And the mindset shift that I want to introduce is, look, let's take, right? People call it the happy path or the golden process or what we want it to be, right? And in the beginning, that might just cover 20, 30% of your cases, right? But from there on out, all you start doing is, how do I get more stuff onto that happy path instead of thinking, how can I automate other paths, right?
Exactly, yeah.
But sorry to say, right? It comes back to you got to climb that ladder and start with the basic work, right? It kind of keeps coming back whenever you think about automation. You want to do it right at the beginning.
Yeah, 100%. And I think, that it came back to a point that you mentioned earlier around the kind of give and take and the kind of carrot and stick with this where, well, I'm not going to invest all this time up front on building this Greek temple if I'm seeing no automation. And that's where you're like, well, we will, and we'll begin to do the happy path and we'll do the low-hanging fruit. All the consulting terms are coming out today. But you do focus on that maybe 20 to 40% that actually works. That's where you get buy-in then from the people that are actually working on the process and thinking exactly like you said, how can I actually improve this process to make sure that we can automate this in the future as well? So
absolutely. And I think this question for do I get the return on investment, right? That's always out there, right? And I think there's a lot of organizations, like the largest ones in the world, they're taking huge risks right now, right? If you see the amounts of money they invest into AI and data, it's going to be exciting to see if it pays out, right? I'm pretty convinced it will, right? Because that's another element that we often talk about, right? You kind of look at the opportunities that are out there. You as an organization are confronted with something. This is what others have done, right? And then you look at your own process and you're like, we're so far away from that, right? That's not realistic. Now, the problem is you need to start, right? You can't say, oh, we're too far away and not do it.
You're right,
because somebody else is experimenting, right? And it might be your competitor that's actually behind you right now, but probably because they are behind, they're more leaning towards experimenting, right? And all of a sudden, they take those steps, right? And they come closer to that vision where you thought, oh, that's a bit too much. And I think the paradigm should be just experiment, right? Go after it. Of course, assess where's the opportunity, what's my biggest bang for the buck, but go after it, right? Experiment, be curious. It's exciting times right now in automation.
Yeah, 100%. And it is daunting, but it's also more accessible than it's ever been in a way because of the emergence of ChatGPT. It's in common day language, while before RPA wouldn't have been in common day language. Not that it is now, but that idea of automation and AI is about, you ask anyone about it, they'll have some sort of opinion on it. And that's even further than what it was beforehand. So, there's opportunities to kind of play around with the technology and see where it could fit into a function within your business. Yeah.
And look, the interesting part, people have been working on this stuff for ages, right? It didn't just pop up and it was like, hey, by the way, here's ChatGPT, everybody have fun with it, right? There's people that invested lifetimes into getting to that point, right? And we're just at that tipping point where it just accelerates where we feel it in day-to-day life, where we feel it at work or even for private life. I think another interesting thing that we find right now, I mean, Gen AI is everywhere. I don't think there's a single call right now that I'm on where it's not somebody mentioning, oh, maybe Gen AI can solve that for us, right? It takes up a lot of space in the conversations. I'd say oftentimes even 50, 60, 70% of the space of the conversation. The actual kind of value realized and the impact achieved, or out of the total automation impact, it's probably somewhere close 5 to 10%, right? It's still the fundamental technology, the rule-based automation in a lot of places where it's just the better answer for now, right? We're evolving and kind of it will grow and more use cases will come and it will probably take up space as much as it does in the conversations, also on the impact. But right now, I think there's some kind of disproportionate, how much attention does it get versus how much does it deliver? Now, that being said, you said something, right? You can start experimenting, playing around. I encourage everybody to do that, right? Because we don't really know yet where exactly it's going to go and what's the next thing we'll develop. And I'm doing that myself as well, right? So
there's an engineer in you yet.
There is an engineer in me, absolutely, right? So these crazy ideas about you sit down on the couch and your TV turns on, right? I keep having those kind of strange ideas and I want to explore them, right? But sometimes you kind of get stuck in your head thinking about a problem. And I was going down the road and trying to use Gen AI as my problem-solving buddy, right? So basically, hey, here's what I'm thinking about. Ask me 5 questions, right? We'd go back and forward and was having this beautiful conversation that, was really stimulating to the mind. And I was okay, this sounds like a really cool business idea, right? Ask me more questions how we can turn it into a business idea. And I've been working with it for like 2.5 days straight over a weekend, right? And I was super excited. And then I said, all right, and now write me a 40-page summary of everything we discussed, enhance it with research, and make it ready for me to submit this.
Yeah.
First answer I get, this is going to take me 48 hours. I was like, hey, wait a second, what is that? And I was like, okay, trust the process, right? Okay. Experiment. So I said, all right, I'll come back in 48 hours. I'd like to receive the document then. Then I receive a PDF document, font size 24, that's 6 pages long and has nothing of the conversation we've been having, right? And I was like super disappointed. I mean, if it solves that problem, right? Amazing, right?
Yeah.
Up until that point, everything exciting, and all of a sudden there was this huge setback, right? And I think, of course, disappointing to me, but great learning experience, right?
Yeah.
I was amazed by what it can do, and I was then a bit shocked by what it cannot do.
Yeah.
But that will come, right? That will
yeah.
evolve. And I think that experience to me helps me a lot to now kind of frame conversations when I talk about this stuff. It's just that personal experience you also need to make for yourself.
Yeah, that's a great story. That's really interesting. I was like,
I will continue working on it, right? Because this was, highly conceptual. There's other stuff in my mind where I'm thinking about, hey, app development, right? Here's a cool app that I would like to have, right? And I mean, GenAI is known for its coding ability. Mm-hmm. It's not a complicated app,
it's a good
right?
start. Yeah,
exactly. It might be something that actually works already right now. So I'm super excited to keep playing around with it.
Yeah. Yeah, no, that's great. I was looking forward to seeing what that output was.
You could share that afterwards. I think it's not at a level that I'd say it's confidential information.
Yeah, fair. I think if one of your colleagues came back after 48 hours or something like that, I don't think they'd be in on Monday morning. So.
No, actually, that would have been a very serious feedback conversation.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, maybe a little 1-to-1 or something like that in the diary. But no, that's great. And yeah, we're coming towards the end now. I suppose you've touched on kind of some advice that you would give to clients when you're starting out, but to kind of summarize maybe what you think could be a trend in the future, or also something to kind of help the clients on their journey towards automation, what would you say to them?
Yeah, it's a big question.
It's a very big question.
It's a very big question, right?
You pick whatever you want from it. Yeah.
Okay. Now, I think, look, disclaimer, we probably don't know,
of course,
where it will evolve, right? I think what we see right now, if you would have asked us 5 years ago, we wouldn't have said this will happen, right? So everything's just accelerating so fast that I think to give a reliable estimate that you can bet your money on, please don't, right? I don't want to take accountability for that. So, but look, there's a couple of things that we've looked at, kind of how kind of development accelerates the impact that automation has on work life, right? And while we were under the impression that maybe by 2040, 2050 or so, a lot of manual labor would disappear, we're now at the impression that maybe by 2030, right?
Yeah.
50% of manual labor from what we know today will be automated and gone, right? So that's huge, right? Because that basically affects everyone, right? Because it's not going to be there's 50% of people not affected and 50% of people that are 100% affected, but it's really going to touch every single job that we do, right? Whether it's in finance or, in the insurance processes, it's in consulting as well, right?
Yeah.
Us ourselves are affected by the changes as well. So it's super fast kind of evolving and developing. And it's going to change the nature of work a lot, right? So, example that I was thinking about, or a more simple example, just to kind of understand the magnitude. Your kind of HR business partner, beautiful buzzword, right? That oftentimes gets kind of not treated the way it should be, but. Oftentimes you reach out to your business partner to understand, hey, how many vacation days do I have left? What's my vacation balance? I don't have an overview. Can you tell me? They'd go into your file, look it up, send you an email and say, this is it, right? That kind of stuff. Even if you don't have the perfectly automated system, you could interact with a system that will get the information for you, right? So your HR business partner or your HR employee, they're not going to be doing that type of work anymore, right?
Yeah.
So what do we do with the freed up capacity? Let's do something more value adding.
Yeah, exactly.
Right? For example, let's actually run a report across all open vacation days right now, basically, right? Close to the end of the year, right? Last quarter, how many open vacation days we have. And then let's come up with a workforce planning kind of approach. How do we get the number down, right? What does our demand look like? What does our capacity look like? Who should be in when? What are the plans we want to make to optimize our capacity that we have at hand? And all of a sudden, this, how many days do I have left? 17, turns into you're really optimizing how the company spends their money, right? And your role just gets tremendously elevated in terms of responsibility. So that's kind of one big change, right? And that's kind of a fairly simple example, right? Because you can think this further, where you might move into a finance function and you'd say, look, I have a large language model connected to all of my company information, to my consolidation, and I wanted to give me a first draft, right? Not the final version, but probably a first draft of what my quarterly report look like, my annual report. Which analysis can I run, right? I can use it for, hey, give me your suggestion on what's the root causes for the sales drop in quarter 3, right? And it can basically analyze your data, and it can enhance it with market information and other sources. And you're like, wow, this just expands the capacity that I myself am capable of doing. So the changes and where this is going, I don't know exactly where it will end up, but I'm pretty sure it's going to be big.
Exactly. And I think it provides more time for the actual people interactions as well, which is super important. Those things,
it's a people business in the end, right?
Yeah, and that's it. And I suppose that all that time was kind of consumed by those, and it's not admin, but it's tedious tasks that need kind of time to do it rather than just using automation for it. But even in HR, for example, where, you know, maybe on the people management side or people development side within a company is something that's really important within a company for its culture and everything. But, you know, if all those tasks are sorted for you, you can put even more time into that and developing your actual colleagues as well. So, you know, it's not that you're not doing a job, it's that your time is used in a better manner, like you were saying. So yeah, it's going to be exciting to see where it goes.
Yeah, and like there's, right, just talking with you right now, there's ideas sparking all over the place where I'd say, hey,
get the ChatGPT out there, get the personal assistant.
There we go. No, so I think people development and kind of tailored training programs, right? That's stuff we do. So we have people out in the field, and we want to understand, hey, what's their sales performance? What's their first-time repair performance, right? Depending on whether you're looking sales, maintenance, crews that go out in the field. And we kind of feed the performance data, of course, in anonymized ways and kind of everything GDPR compliant. We feed that into a model, and the model tells us, hey, this person probably benefits from X, Y, Z. This might be a training. This might be a one-on-one conversation. This might be a ride-along with another person, right? Whatever it is. But all of a sudden, you have somebody there that helps you understand performance and suggests interventions and how to get better. I think for the engineers and the creative people, right, it's exciting times, right? You can think about so much that's possible.
Definitely. So just to wrap up, once again, you're at the All Eyes on Automation in Berlin in November. Do you want to give just a brief insight of what the topic is roughly going to be about?
Yeah. I think we spoke about the exciting opportunity, and we also spoke about kind of why things sometimes don't work. I think our latest research shows that 84% of organizations only see a third of the impact on their P&L bottom line that they were expecting, right? So there is something where you see the opportunity, you're excited, and you just struggle to get it, right? And I think the All Eyes on Automation will be exciting because there's all these brilliant people in the room that just know technology and code and what technology can do and how to do it best. They're all in one room, right? And they know their stuff, right? So I'm probably not going to compete with them, but still, right? I want to bring something new to that, right? I basically want to say, hey, if we know technology so well and we can do all this, why is it organizations have the type of challenges that I was just mentioning? Right? So basically, based on the recent engagements we've run and the experience we have with our clients, I'm going to take a bit of a bigger perspective on automation programs, right? Large-scale automation programs at big organizations. And what's kind of the secret sauce there to get that right? because there's a lot more to automation than tech and code,
Yeah,
right?
100%,
We touched upon a couple of them that we want to explore in more detail, right? The backing from your senior management, right? How do you get excitement behind this? A continuous push that you actually open doors, that people are willing to listen when you come and say, hey, I have no idea for automation. We kind of spoke about the finance element, the return on investment. How do I integrate my automation program with colleagues in finance to track the impact from initiatives that we're running? How do I kind of address all the changes for people affected by automation, right? The change in role, right? When you've always looked up vacation days and all of a sudden you're making workforce plans, that's a change that you want to be ready for, that HR needs to accompany, right? So there's so many topics that are relevant towards automation that are not tech and code. That's just huge, right? And that's kind of one of the other interesting things that we advise our clients on, which is basically for every dollar, euro, pound, wherever you are in the world, you invest into automation, you want to invest the same amount into change management. And that's
a whole other podcast.
That's a whole other podcast, exactly, right?
It's so true, though.
And parts of this we're going to cover at the All Eyes on Automation in Berlin. So I'm super excited to explore there something that maybe is a little bit out of the realm of what we all specialize in when we're there. And it's trying to really say, okay, how do we do this at scale at large organizations? How do we make sure we up those numbers from people that are successful? It's not 3 to 5% that do this successfully at scale, that it's not 80% that only see a third of the value delivered, but that we really turn to this and say, wow, that had an impact. That changed how we work here. And that's, I think, really the long and sustainable change and improvement that we're looking for.
Brilliant. Really looking forward to it, Lucas. And
absolutely.
Thanks again for coming on, and enjoy the rest of your day in London.
Thank you. Sure will do. Thank you for having me.